last night on the amendment made by Senator Eddie Calvo, and we discussed. Let me see. We had already two more speakers on the list, and Senator Isisaki and also Senator Speaker Forbes. Senator Isisaki, do you want to speak on the amendment? No, you don't have to speak if you don't want to, but your name's in the list here.
Mr. Chair, I'll waive until another time. Thank you.
Okay, Senator Speaker Forbes. Okay, Senator Calvo, you're the last speaker on your amendment.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I move to withdraw my amendment.
Okay, the motion is to withdraw the amendment that he made, and this is.
Speaker, I object.
Just a minute. It's number 8. Number 8. Oh, no. The number 8 amendment that we were discussing last night. Right. Okay, on the motion to withdraw, without objection, so ordered. Huh?
I object to the withdrawal.
Okay, the motion is there's an
Let's
objection.
call for the vote.
Okay. As many as are in favor to withdraw the motion of Senator Calvo, number 8 amendment, please signify by raising your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, yes. Okay, motion pass. Senator Palacios, on the Bill 74 as amended, further amended, continued to be amended. Senator Palacios.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I offer an amendment to add a new section to the miscellaneous provisions. Essentially, an amendment to replacing the Calvo amendment, and it's being passed out now. And the only difference between this amendment and the Calvo amendment is that this amendment, the appendix of which deleted the police, the AG, the judiciary, and the mayor's council.
Okay, on the Palacios amendment, Senator Ben Pangilinan.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the amendment essentially does the same as the Calvo amendment, with the exception, of course, as you say, of, I guess I'll grant that there is a prioritization in this amendment in terms of which departments and agencies get cut and which don't. But when we do that, of course, we then now have to ensure that the other departments and agencies equally share the burden without any further examination of the additional effects that those additional burdens will have. So on one hand, I'm not trying to argue both sides of the question here, but the matter, again, in which the approach is being done without any additional consultation with any other departments and agencies who are in here, of course, pleading for their lives, basically, to ensure that they continue to provide public service, have now just been further hampered without due consideration. And I just want the members of the body, of course, I guess not the body, but of course the public and the departments and agencies to know that they do have some individuals in this hall that value their input and their judgment and would have preferred that we had somehow, through this entire process, been able to discuss the impact that this additional reductions will have on their operations in providing services to the people of Guam. Of course, we also want to note that because of the compression of the reductions here, when you say that a department and agency is getting a a reduction of for example, 1.6 million at the Department of Corrections, that the problem with, not the problem with that, but the reality of that, of course, is that that 1.6 has to be reduced over a 5-month period, meaning that it really is going to result in almost a doubling of the reduction in operating costs for those departments and agencies. I don't know what the Department of Corrections is going to do with a basically $3.2 million reduction in operating cost over the last 5 months, because they had no opportunity to plan for or even reduce operating costs in the beginning of the 5, 6, 7 months of the beginning of this fiscal year. And within 5 months, we're going to have to tell them they're going to have to cut this. I think the director of the Department of Corrections was very forthcoming with regards to where he can make the cuts, and identified somewhere in the neighborhood of $400,000 or $500,000 that he says he can live with. But when you triple that, basically, or quadruple that by now requiring him to cut 1.6 without any additional input from him, without knowing what the effects are and the ramifications are, I really believe that we're being derelict in our duty here. Thank you, and I object to the amendment.
Okay. Senator Forbes, or Speaker Forbes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to begin by congratulating Senator Palacios for his courage. I've had the pleasure of serving him now. This is his second term, and you know, the one thing that I've always been impressed with Senator Palacios is the fact that both in the last legislature and in this legislature, he's a man unswayed by politics. I think we all know how this is all going to play out in the end. It's going to be primarily a partisan vote. And I'll be entirely honest with you, Mr. Chair, like many of my colleagues who have served here a long time, there's more than one vote I've taken because, you know, the politics of the moment and the affiliations of the moment required it. But there's a couple guys that I have served with who've always impressed me with their forthrightness and their fortitude. One's no longer here. That's Senator Bob Klitsky. I hope when he finishes his sabbatical of 2 years that Bob will strongly consider coming back to this body, because of the many people that I've served with in the time I've been here. He was an inspiration because of his dedication to what was at hand and doing the best that was possible under the circumstances without external considerations. And the other is Senator Palacios, who, like Senator Klitsky, has been pretty much, without exception, a person of principle in this body. What he's done is he listened to a lot of the debate last night. And the debate last night, from almost everyone, was, well, we need prioritization. We need to make sure the cops aren't going to be hurt. We need to make sure that law enforcement is protected because of the importance of law enforcement. There was a recognition that the Guam public school system had been granted some special consideration, and a desire to make sure that that consideration was extended to the police and to the prosecution aspect of the government and to the courts who have to handle all these cases. Basically, he listened. I certainly listened. And when I walked away from session last night, I personally was of the opinion that, yeah, we need to be a bit more consistent in ensuring that in our effort to balance this, we don't harm some of those things that we consider most important in terms of what this government does. But, Mr. Chairman, I beg everyone to understand one simple, unassailable fact. this budget, at the request of the governor, limits spending authority to exactly the revenue number that is identified in the bill. The governor, in his proposal, had a slightly larger revenue number because he wanted to raise the gross receipts tax, something that everyone in this room universally opposed on both sides of the aisle. So there is a small variance in that. It's also true that the bill that the governor sent us, alas, even with the revenue increases he proposed, did not balance. So it was necessary for this body to find some way to do that. Some revenue measures were passed. Those that were passed didn't receive monumental objection. In fact, if memory serves, some of those revenue measures, in fact, more than one revenue measure, and I may do a little bit of research after engrossment to take a look at that, were proposed by members of both sides of the aisle. And as a result, revenues were raised to a point. But I think it was clear to everyone from the get-go that there wasn't any possibility of raising revenues to the point that the shortfall in the governor's bill could be met, that inevitably it would require cuts. Even more salient, many of the people who came and spoke to us about the revenue measures did leave with one message. If we must do this, fine, but show us where the cuts are going to come. And we said, all of us, well, the cuts will be there. Now, it's true that the level and nature of those cuts has changed over time, in part because as we looked at these cuts and how they would affect agencies and departments, many of us, myself included, but also inclusive of people on both sides of the aisle, felt that certain departments and certain activities, because of their priority, should not receive the same degree of cuts. Presumably, we all understood that when we did that, other cuts were going to have to be forthcoming from other areas of the government. If we didn't understand that, I don't know how we could have had any other understanding. Notwithstanding that, motions were made to restore areas. I supported many of those motions. Some I did not, but others I did because they were important areas in my mind. But I always understood that at the end of the day, having done that, something else would have to be cut. Now, the statement seems to be being made that every time we adjust one of these numbers, we have to have a new round of hearings. I ask all of my colleagues, because my memory may be faulty, but in 24 budgets that I have sat through in this legislature, some of them presided over by Republican chairs of finance and taxation, some of them presided over by Democratic chairs of finance and taxation, I have never recalled a circumstance where every time we made an amendment to a number, we had to bring in the entire cabinet. It's never happened in the 24 budgets I've seen. Now, an argument is being presented that basically says, ooh, there's going to be more impact as a result of this cut. Let's bring the departments and agencies back. I humbly submit to you, Speaker, that if the way we are to conduct this is that every single change to an appropriation number requires testimony from a department or agency, then notwithstanding how long we have been here, we would never leave, nor would any budget process ever be done, because I don't remember any budget in the last 24, whether they were budgets presided over and put forth by Democratic chairmanships or Republican chairmanships, where we didn't amend numbers after taking testimony. And they weren't always, in fact, they were almost never all up. Usually they were down. So, Mr. Chair, before we break for lunch, I just want to say that I am empathetic. I really am. And I want all my colleagues to know this. This is a rough situation for anybody to be in, but it's rougher yet for the community. And who among us would not love to be able to say, we want to shrink the revenues as much as we can to relieve the burden on the people of Guam, but guarantee that every department and agency is going to have all the money they require, or I'm not even sure require, all the money they desire. You know what? I'm going to modify what I just said. Actually, I wouldn't want to do that. That would not be a good way to do things either. We are faced with the simple truth that in order to comply with what the governor has been requesting all along, even though what he sent us did not in fact reflect what was stated, in order to balance this budget, cuts will be made. And it's going to happen one way or the other. And it's going to happen sooner or later. And it's going to happen in this case sooner. And I do want to remind everybody that, very shortly, in fact, probably right after this process, my understanding is we're going to be launching on the 2008 budget cycle. And I sincerely doubt, Mr. Speaker, that the revenue picture is going to change so drastically that we won't have to worry about cutting anything. We won't have to worry about reducing costs. We won't have to worry. I think that's just an unrealistic expectation going in. And in the final analysis, I never tell people how to vote, no matter what side of the aisle they're on. People got to make up their own minds about what they want to do. But there is no solution now or in the long term until the economy picks up to where the revenues come in at a higher clip. There is no solution that does not involve cutting. There just isn't. And that's simply the way it's going to have to be. And I don't think that when we do the 2008 budget, Mr. Speaker,
Thank you, Senator Forbes.
we'll be bringing everybody in for consultation every 5 minutes to find out how they feel about stuff.
Okay, the Committee of the Whole will recess until 2 o'clock this afternoon. But please, 2 o'clock is 2 o'clock, okay? Not legislative 2 o'clock. And the Committee of the Whole is back in session. Senator Senator Isisaki, you're recognized on the amendment of Senator Palacios.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm troubled. I think we're all troubled. We're all pained. I think the difficulty we face today is not a product of this year. It's a product of years and years of spending way too much money. Years and years of spending way above our revenues for each year, and that's been perpetuated, been going on for years and years, and it's an embarrassment. It's an embarrassment by our government and by our past leadership. And I'm happy to see that we are part of a new group that's going to find resolution to this. Even if we only achieve a current approach to just striving for a balanced budget, a balanced budget really is not enough. if you really think about it. I mean, we owe way too much money, and a balanced budget is only going to stop the bleeding. Stopping the bleeding is absolutely essential, and from there we need to find ways to increase the revenue and reduce the spending some more. And that's going to lead us down the road to where we can be responsible debtors. And being responsible debtors, really trying to find resolution and solutions to paying down our debt. Our debt, which is in excess of $1.7, $1.8 billion. That's like way too many zeros than I can calculate. And so I commend my colleague and friend for 35 years or longer that I've known Senator Palacios, and I commend him. I thank him for taking a stand to work with us to find resolution to at least stop the bleeding. And stopping the bleeding is really going to help us to not further increase the debt. And so as painful as this process may be, and as pained as I am, we need to do this. And I tell you what, the other part of this is to just go through the difficult process of reducing another $18 million in spending. And it's a difficult thing for us to do because it's going to affect every aspect of our government and our community. But if we don't do this, we're going to continue to spend more than we make. It's like a family living on a credit card month after month after month, going years after years. So we can't continue to do that. The governor's going to have a difficult task of running our government, and with all the cuts that we're facing today. But we need to go through that point. I commend an effort by Senator Frank Blas Jr. for putting forth an amendment that will be introduced shortly to authorize the governor a lot of transfer authority. And that's the only way we can do this, to give the governor the flexibility to transfer so he can run and manage this government. And for all of us, I tell you, I speak for myself when I say that, you know, the policing, the corrections function, the fire functions, DYA, and all the entities of our government, most especially the public safety components, are going to hurt. And hurting those components are going to make it difficult for our community to ensure that we continue to run a safe and secure community. So I am troubled by all this, but how do we proceed? We need to go forward. We need to find the solutions beyond what we're doing with this budget. But this budget is going to help us to stop the bleeding, which we must. So, Mr. Speaker, I thank you, and I thank my colleagues for moving forward bravely and boldly. Most especially, I want to recognize and thank Senator Palacios for his bold move to introduce this amendment. Thank you.
Senator Respicio, on the Palacios amendment. No, I have other people.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, after 8 weeks of being in this legislative hall, after 8 weeks of addressing the financial meltdown facing this government of Guam, this is the work product that we have to show for the people of Guam. I think it's tragic. I stand against the Palacios amendment because I don't believe that this is how we should run the government, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I want to echo the sentiments of the previous speaker where he talked about this is we're here because of past leadership. At the same time you say it's past leadership, it's also the current leadership. I know there's plenty of blame to go around, but we're here because we continue to ignore the true financial problems facing this government of Guam, facing this island, and this Bill 74 does not recognize what needs to be done in terms of how we first recognize what our debt is, the kind of things that needs to be done in a very open and transparent process. There's nothing in the last 8 weeks, Mr. Chairman, that has been transparent. On one hand, we say that the agencies have to follow the mandates. On the other hand, we pat them on the back and tell them it's okay. There's a way for the governor to channel finances back into your department or agency. On one hand, we're told that this will not result in any furloughs, terminations, or salary reduction, when some of us knew that that was the furthest thing from the truth. But it's not until some of us follow the process, point out the inconsistencies, and we don't do that, Mr. Chairman, to be difficult. We do that because our people deserve a right to know what's going on in their government. From the very beginning, we've asked to the chairman to create a bipartisan subcommittee to determine the debt. In order to know what we need to do with our financial situation, we must first know as a starting point. If any one of us in our years of or in our experiences with applying for loans, if you go to the bank and they ask you how much do you have to, how much do you want to borrow, and you tell them, and they ask you how much do you owe, and you tell them, well, it could be this number, it could be that number, the first thing they're going to do is thank you and ask you to leave. And that's exactly what this legislature continues to do. Earlier, we heard from a senator from Sinahanya who said that this vote will probably be decided along party lines, and that this is the governor's bill, and that there's also other comments praising Senator Palacios, a Democrat who moved the fees, who moved all these cuts to all the various departments and agencies. And we also have comments that this is a we product. Mr. Chairman, this is not a we product. This will be a product of every single senator who votes yes on this bill, whether it's Republican or Democrat. And so what this amendment does, offered by Senator Palacios, really does not recognize the manner by which budgets should be handled. It does not go to every single department and agency and ask the director for them to justify what their programs are based on their mandates. It simply says you shall receive an across-the-board cuts. The governor initially proposed 2.5%. These cuts that Senator Palacios is proposing is as high as 14%. And the impact, because of the compressed timeline, is probably 30%, 20 to 30% in most of these agencies, excepting, of course, those that were exempted. I'm just appalled. I'm appalled, Mr. Chairman, when we're criticized that we don't have any solutions, that what do some of us have to offer, when it's very clear from the very beginning we've offered solutions. And there's some good parts on this bill because it reflects some of the amendments that some of us has made. But by and large, this process where everything that's possible to occur was just done opposite, Mr. Chairman, and there's not. This is just not the way to go. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Simiso, on the motion or on the amendment made by Senator Palacios. Senator Simiso? Okay, Senator Gutterts, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, this has been a very difficult experience. I'm sure not just for myself, but for all of our colleagues. For almost 9 weeks now, we've been here. We've looked at 3 or 4 versions of the governor's budget. I'm certain that all of my colleagues have made a conscientious effort to do their very best in terms of what is appropriate and needed at this difficult time on our island. I believe I've tried very hard to help make this bill a better bill, and I am grateful to my colleagues for having entertained a number of amendments. Of course, among those have been the recognition that we need to do something of a more permanent nature to modernize our government and make it more efficient, accountable, and responsive to the needs of the community at this point in our history. That is reflected in the section of this bill which calls for modernization and streamlining in the government of Guam. And and provides a mechanism to develop a plan to make that happen. But because of the immediate issues before us, I must say that I have serious reservations about the amendment that has been presented by my colleague. My concerns are simply that a number of the agencies that are included in the amendment and described herein, I believe, will in fact have to close their doors. All of you have the appendix to the amendment. You see at the very top, for the University of Guam, they will experience a cut of $2,969,000 plus. How will the University of Guam be able to operate with such a dramatic reduction in their budget, particularly since they are owed over $7 million for this fiscal year alone in terms of its approved budget? Community college.
Mr. Chairman, just point of order. Are you directing a question at the mover of the amendment? How would the university? I'm just trying
Senator, you're out of order.
I am?
Yes. She has not asked the question. The question is always directed to the chair.
Mr.
Okay, so then
Chairman.
the chair should answer then. Thank you.
Senator, please. Okay, Senator Guthertz, please continue.
Thank you. I'll entertain a question from many of my colleagues, but Mr. Chairman, I did want to ask the mover of this amendment. How does he anticipate the University of Guam being able to keep its doors open with a $3 million cut? How will they accommodate the nearly 4,000 students enrolled at the university? How will the university meet its accreditation requirements to the Western Association of Schools and Colleges with a $3 million cut? Is the mover of the amendment in the hall, Mr. Chairman?
Presently, he's not on his desk.
Well, someone needs to answer this question, because the people of Guam out there are going to ask this question.
I think we have rehashed this over and over again.
Well,
Senator
Mr.
Guthertz,
Chairman,
so-
my comments continue. Aside from the university, Guam Community College will have a $500,000 cut. The Department of Public Health and Social Services will have over a $2 million cut to its current budget. It will likely have to turn people away and not be able to accommodate people in serious need for public health services. Mental health, where most of our most vulnerable citizens rely upon for help, will experience over $500,000 in cuts. The Guam Fire Department, $2.5 million plus in cuts. The Department of Corrections. Now, of course, Mr. Speaker, it's very easy for us here to say we have to distribute the cuts evenly to everybody. But as you know, and as our Speaker has recognized, I've been a great proponent of prioritization. I think there's some prioritization in the actions that have been taken here. We've prioritized the hospital. We've prioritized the public school system. We've given some leeway to the police department, to the courts, to the Attorney General's office. Those entities are critical, and the Mayor's Council are critical in delivering services to our people. But we have seemed, unfortunately, to have abandoned other entities, many of which are life and death institutions, critical to the health of our people and the safety of our people. Mr. Speaker, I don't blame anyone for this, but I do believe the process that has been involved in the last 9 weeks should have been different. I believe we should have focused on revenue generation first. We should have assessed where our money is going and why we don't have enough. We should have built upon the recognition that this little government gives too much money away that we can't afford to give away. And that is why, to a great part, that we are in the boat that we're in right now. Now, I have prepared an amendment, Mr. Chairman. This morning in the newspaper, one of our leaders in the legislature was quoted to have said,
Senator Gutierrez, can you say your amendment?
I'm gonna
Otherwise, your
make my
time is up.
amendment. This is part of the amendment. One of the leaders in the legislature said that the budget will be balanced mostly through additional government budget cuts and not through revenue generating measures. That in itself is an imbalance. You cannot balance the budget just by cutting agencies. We need to balance the budget by identifying revenue sources.
What is your
Here's
amendment?
my amendment, Mr. Chairman. This government has never done this before, and I think it's time we do an assessment. My amendment would simply place a moratorium on the business privilege tax exemptions effective June 1st, 2007, and continuing until October 1, 2008. There shall be a moratorium on the application of the provisions contained in Section 26203 of Title 11 of the Guam Code Annotated.
Senator,
I'm reading the amendment, Mr. Chairman.
I'm sorry, you're out of order. We are talking on the Palacios amendment.
I know,
right
but
now.
I'm making an amendment to the Palacios amendment.
Where? No, you're not.
Yes, I am, Mr. Chairman.
This is a separate amendment altogether from a Palacios amendment. You can offer this later on, but as of now, we're talking only on the Palacios amendment. How are you going to amend Palacios amendment
By
this?
adding this to the Palacios proposal.
No, you cannot do that. You just put it by itself.
All right, then I will do it then, as soon as we
Thank you.
dispense with the Palacios amendment.
Yes,
But I believe, Mr. Chairman, we cannot proceed without identifying some
I
revenue
understand that.
enhancements.
But thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Senator Blas.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I too stand in support of the amendment proffered by the good senator from Ordot. I'm not going to mention names. I'm not going to mention parties. I'm just going to mention the good senator because there's no need to. You know, over the last several weeks, 15 members of this body have mulled over how we can ensure that government service can continue to be provided. Despite the financial situation and the financial crisis that we're in. And over the last several weeks, we've gone back and forth as to how we can get more revenue. And some of the suggestions and some of the ways, the means for us, for the government of Guam to get these revenues, weren't always and totally agreed upon. But this body, as a majority, made those decisions. And this body, even after making those decisions and in fact increasing those revenues, the amounts that this government expects to receive still do not meet, at least by projection, meet the needs to continue to run the government at the pace that it's running. And now we're at a point of being able to figure out whether or not this, as a result of this amendment, if this is actually a way that we can balance the budget. Balancing the budget is very simple. You reduce the amount of spending that you have based on the amount of revenues you're going to bringing in. And to take the words from, a very respected colleague on a suggestion that he provided to the media, is to take out anything that we call penalty and as far as reporting requirement, and to just apply the cuts correspondingly by reducing the various appropriation levels. And that's what this amendment is doing. That's what this amendment is doing. We can't sugarcoat this anymore. There's no silver lining to this. I think we've come to the hour where we're all going to have to face the reality. And as painful as it is, I think that I know we'd have an obligation to provide services that we can afford. And work toward building those services that we wish to have, that we desire to have. So with that, Mr. Chair, again, as painful as it is, and it is, but being very real about it, I support the amendment proffered. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Senator Simisu, would you like to talk on this? I did call your name earlier.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. It's really curious because I just came from my ear doctor and I can hear clearly, but I didn't hear my name. Jeez, I got to go back to him and get my refund. I don't want to make light of.
You can ask Senator Respicio. I did call your name.
Yes, I thank you very much. I got to go back and have this double check, man. Mane luza mananahu. Today, we keep saying, mungi salapi hadi sinya murikohi salapi. Unambi mas marikoko salapi para hita gini para operasyon gobyerno idapamenton revenue and taxation. Ang tanisita na patafan maprotehe taagan ni polisiya. Ang tanisita pa maiduka pa magonta taagan ni educational system. Lord tanisita sa lapi kota comprende na para ta utod ikanay niya and ipatas niya revenue taxation by reducing na niya budget close to $1 million. $973,928. If you need money, you go to the taxman for the government. That is where he is or she is king in bringing in money to us. And we're going to cut, if you know English, the goose that lays the golden egg. In this particular case, they don't lay the golden egg. What revenue taxation goes out and catch those goose and bring them in. Now I just wonder, in my mind, I said for every dollar that we invest in revenue enhancement activities such as revenue taxation, there's going to be a corresponding return into your investment. I spoke to the deputy director, a position that I held over 30 some years ago. And he says just one revenue officer at an average salary of, he said, $25,000 could generate $500,000 in assessed tax. So if we have Rory's abacus and he divides 25,000 into $1 million, almost close to $1 million, and then turn that around and he gives you the number of revenue officers, auditors, revenue agents, special investigators, tax preparers. You can flip that around and you can be guaranteed. But if we don't have enough people, ang tinahong tauto gi revenue taxation, malingo oportunidad ni para taggosa taxes ni jiset ti popapasi. 3 years and we lose the revenues. And then here, we're going to cut them. When we need money for the University of Guam, you know, on the last accreditation of which I was the chairman of the board that we made it accredited, one of the single most important thing that they ask is the government committed to financing the institution of higher learning to carry out its mandates. And if the government or the people of Guam does not commit to that, then it jeopardizes accreditation. The multiplier on that is close to $65 million in revenues from the federal government. But the most important thing is the commitment and the contract that we have with the students of my alma mater, the University of Guam. The other cornerstone that I looked at was the health. I'm glad we had the exemption. But we all know that the command ship that deals with not only health, public health, and social services. Senator Pangilinan mentioned that we cut that. But I'm trying to focus in all of the limit. It does not make sense to me. Penny wise, pound foolish. So you know, Mr. Chairman, if I'm in order, I say zero out revenue and taxation and gift and restore back their full budget. And that's my motion on this particular item, if I'm in order.
I'm sorry you're not.
Okay, I am totally out of order. But I'm going to tell you that's a disorder on what we're doing. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Calvo.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, it's been a very difficult past couple of days where all of us senators have been trying to deliberate on a budget, and a budget, of course, that was originally sent to us imbalanced. And again, unfortunately, because of that imbalance, we've had to craft, through long hours and days and weeks of hard work, a budget that was balanced. Yesterday, I proffered an amendment that dealt with the shortfalls. And the shortfalls that have occurred, obviously, because many of the speakers that have just spoken recently in this particular amendment were concerned about deappropriations. And with their concern for deappropriation and the motions they had made to reappropriate, an imbalance occurred. With that imbalance, I made an amendment yesterday, last night. Of course, it was a simple amendment. I'm not oversight over any particular department or agency. I'm the budget chair, and it's my job to ensure we have a balanced budget. And with that, I came with a firm belief that this imbalance would be spread out amongst all the agencies except for Guam Public School System and the Guam Memorial Hospital. Obviously, education had been our priority. The Guam Public School System had been our priority. And obviously, the hospital, which again is an institution that deals with the health, like not only the health, the life and death, and the life and possibly the death of our citizens. And last night I proffered an amendment. And as I proffered that amendment and I listened to the arguments of many of my colleagues about their concerns about setting priorities, it became very clear that my amendment wasn't going to move forward. I needed, and we needed, consensus in this legislature. And that was the reason for the withdrawal of my amendment. I want to congratulate Senator Palacios, the mover of this amendment, because he indeed listened to both the majority and the minority. The concerns from our freshman senator, who was from UOG, and also was at the police department, who was concerned about public safety. And my primo, the sophomore senator from the minority, who was also concerned about the priorities of public safety and judicial independence and prosecutorial independence. And with that, the mover of this amendment sought compromise, seek consensus, and he took to heed the opinions of our freshman senator and my primo, the sophomore senator. And calculations were made. In this is amendment, there is protection for the police department, judiciary, the attorney generals, the mayor's council. That's the participation that was requested from all members of this body. He took to heed the recommendations of his colleagues. Earlier today, the earlier senator, the freshman, mentioned her concern about the reduction in University of Guam of $2.9 million. I heard concerns from my primo, as well as the retiring senator, about the appropriations for Guam Community College, mental health, public health, DISID. And if you look at these numbers, you're right. University of Guam, 2.9 million reduction. You know what, in my amendment, it would have been 2.1 million. If you look at the de-appropriation to public health that was mentioned by one of my colleagues who was again concerned, it's at 2.2 million. It would have been 1.6 million with my amendment. Mental health, we have again the retiring senator, the earlier senator who was a director, a deputy director, and he was concerned it may not even be viable with mental health with cuts and DISID with cuts of 541,000 and 318,000. When my amendment, that 541,000 cut in mental health would have been 392,000. That cut in DISID of 318,000 would have been 231,000. They all, with my amendment, would have been less cuts. But you know, if you look at the appendix from my amendment compared to the author of this amendment, the dollar figure is the same because we all realize we've got to balance this budget. And that is our role as legislators. So as my colleagues are concerned about the cuts, and to, again, some of them because they were former UOG professors, some of them, again, want to see our public safety and the police department resources kept intact. Some of them wanting to see mental health and DISID kept intact. They all had problems with my amendment. Of course, I'm just a budget man, and I wanted a balanced budget. But I want to congratulate the senator who has moved this amendment. I want to congratulate every single senator who spoke before me, because every single senator who is now opposing this amendment at this point because of more cuts, when I proffered my amendment, they wanted to set priorities. So my dear colleagues, this amendment came as a result of a good faith effort by members of this body to work collaboratively, to work towards consensus. Because I know all of us here, we are not here for political games and one-upsmanship. Ultimately, we are here because we have been put here by the people of Guam to serve the better good. I want to thank the author of this amendment. They're difficult decisions, and he made a difficult decision and offered a difficult amendment because he had to realize that we had to have a balanced budget, and yet at the same time, he had to build a consensus for all of us, from those in the majority as well as the members of the minority who have contributed so greatly to this bill. And I want to congratulate the freshman senator and the sophomore senator because they have contributed greatly to this bill with great and terrific amendments, and I anticipate more. Again, I want to thank you very much, Senator, because you worked on a bipartisan basis and you worked on taking inclusion from all. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Okay, on the Palacios Amendment, Senator Tenorio, then for the time being, Senator Tenorio, if you don't mind if I recognize Simisu right now. Okay, Senator Simisu.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes. And you already accept me. Unless you don't want me to speak, then I won't. Let me just say it. I don't want you to speak. Okay,
Anyway,
you already
what's your
recognize
concern?
me. Yeah, that's right. So I'm recognized by the chair. So this. What I wanted to do, Mr. Chair, I bring up the issue of my disorder, out of order rather, being out of order the first time, and I thought about it, and I consulted on a sidebar, and I felt strongly enough that about being in order. So I'm asking the chair and the body to reconsider the chair's decision ruling me out of order and reinstating that I am in order, specifically to the Palacios Amendment on my issue regarding the Department of Revenue and Taxation. And I made a motion.
So the
I'm
question
asking
is,
the
should
body
the
to-
decision of the chair be overruled, right?
Yeah, and I'm
Yeah,
asking you to.
okay. Okay.
I'm challenging the, I
Okay,
guess the chair, so I need
I'll
the
give you
votes.
that. Should the decision be overruled on my motion that he is out of order, on his motion that he's out of order regarding his amendment to the appendix? Okay.
You said, what's the amendment I can use?
Then
No,
vote
I can use. You said. My amendment, and I.
to
and-
delete
I have
certain
it here.
department here or cost.
Yeah?
Yeah. So the motion is, should the decision of the chair be overruled? Okay. As many as are in favor of his motion to overrule the chair, you need 10 votes in this. Signify by raising your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Motion fell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me that opportunity. I really appreciate it.
Senator Tenorio.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chairman, I also have listened and I have worked in consensus with both members of the majority and the minority, but I don't think that is the issue. I think, Mr. Chairman, the issue here is that we have a budgetary shortfall. We have worked for 8 weeks to try to identify funds to fund the operations of this government. And in doing so, we have made some choices which in some cases, in many cases, are without the benefit of public input. But, Mr. Chairman, right now, the dire circumstances financially of this government are such that we are not going to have the revenue which was originally anticipated. And that is the facts that was placed before us. In the latter months of 2006, there was information up to October that said that we were going to be looking at a revenue projection of $450-some million. And then a few months later, those revenue projections changed. As a result of those revenue projections, and in the absence of any alterations in not appropriations, but disbursements of the various agencies that are funded by this budget, and in light of other conditions within the economy, we have less tourists that are coming in, they're spending less. There are a number of different factors that are affecting us, and albeit we have a military growth that's going to occur in the coming years, those years are not now. And we hope that these things are going to generate additional monies to be able to provide the services to our community. But the reality is, currently, we don't have the funds to do it. No one, I don't think, Mr. Chairman, will argue that the University of Guam or Guam Community College are not priorities, because we've said that education is priority, and I think these are fundamental parts of that. Nor do I think anyone will say that public health and social services, nor the Guam Fire Department are not priorities either. There has been cuts in pretty much every category in 38 different lines on this page. And when these cuts have been proposed, and the previous page was 42, as the previous speaker mentioned, there was some consensus building, some effort to try to find a middle ground. And in finding that middle ground, Mr. Chairman, these figures were changed. And the reason that they were changed was to meet a zero balance budget, that we would effectively be able to see that everyone, at the end of the day, after all the revenues are calculated and all the expenses are paid, we are going to break even. And that is what the goal of every budget is. And Mr. Chairman, as you know, as being a chairman in the majority as well as in the minority in some cases, as well as those on the other side of the aisle, we all have a very difficult position because we have responsibilities, not just to our chairmanship of the agencies under our purview, but also to all the people of Guam. And Mr. Chairman, I know that my time is short, and I'll wrap up by saying this. These are not easy things to do. We weren't elected to make simple decisions. We were elected to make hard decisions. And some of those hard decisions are now. And deciding how and where and how deep those cuts are going to be are very painful things. And being silent on any given area, whether it be health, safety, education, or even if it comes down to the medical referral office or the office of the public auditor, they are important roles, and that's why they exist within our government structure. So it's not simply a matter of saying we don't want to cut this and we don't want to cut that, raise taxes here, increase fees there. It's a matter of presenting something which not just our residents of our island, but the entire financial community throughout the globe looks at as a fiduciary responsibility of managing the resources that we have while meeting the obligations of our long-term debts. So, Mr. Chairman, I know that these are difficult times. This is probably one of the most difficult times I've had as being a senator. But this is our choice to make. And unfortunately, we are going to have to make it. So I thank all of my previous speakers who have spoken on this amendment, and I too echo the sentiments of every one of my members prior who have said about the courage and the caliber of the gentleman who's proposing, and I also applaud him. Thank you.
Senator Palacios, would you like to speak on your amendment? Okay. Do we have any other speaker? Okay, Senator Pangilinan, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, once again, I thinking about what's happening here and the struggle that we're having to ensure that the budget is balanced and what we're doing to the departments and agencies, it's just very simple. While we may be able to raise our hand and vote for this budget because the two numbers at the bottom of the right-hand column and the bottom of the left-hand column match, the reality is what's going to happen to the people, not only the people in the agencies, but of course the people that deserve and count on the services provided by these critical departments and agencies. The budget, of course, we've raised fees and we've said that we've balanced it because of the additional revenue in there. And of course, people had opportunities to look at those. But does it make sense that we balance the budget to appropriate to the categories here and reduce to the categories here? When we raise fees in one department that has a budget of $300,000 under its current fee structure is taking in $330,000, and then we approve the fees that would make it $600,000 surplus. How does that fit with the overall scheme of, trying to recover costs and fees? It's obvious. We're trying to raise these fees not for recovering costs, not for greater service, but just to try and balance the budget. The Department of Revenue and Tax is probably is one of the critical agencies. We fully fund the AG, we fully fund the courts, we fund the police, and then we cut corrections. Well, when the police catches the criminal and the AG prosecutes him and the court sentences him to jail, how are we going to put him in jail when we're cutting the Department of Corrections budget by $1.6 million, ostensibly becomes a $3 million cut for the rest of the year? Where are we going to put these people? Back on the streets? That's why the cuts here don't make sense and don't follow the logic that has been espoused by everyone of the prioritization and following through. Mr. Speaker, this budget, we're so glad it's, may I remind this body that the last budget was balanced also. This budget is just as balanced as the original budget of Public Law 28-150, which brings us right back in here. Because I'm telling the body that in my opinion and the opinion of the experts that have been working on this budget all along, we're just not wanting to hear what the effect is. We're going to have to come back in a month or 2 months when salaries aren't paid, when power gets shut off, when trash doesn't get picked up. We're cutting the Department of Public Works by $1 million, and Larry says he's not going to buy any more trucks to fix it. There's $10,000 in receivables that we need to fix the trash trucks, but we can't do it because we're cutting them by $1 million. That's what we mean when we say the budget just doesn't follow the logic espoused by everyone in terms of its balance, so everything's going to work. The reality is it's not. Just as the reality that we refused to face in the last budget was that it's balanced with $25 million of lapsed funds appropriation, $8 million in cost savings from a refinancing of a bond that will never happen. That's how we balance it, and that's how we're balancing this budget. It just doesn't make sense in terms of how we've approached it and the way that we've gone. And sure, the previous budget would have reduced some of the cuts in the priorities here, but it would have taken $2.2 million out of GPD. That's what it would have done. So this one's better because it has no cut at GPD, or this one's better because it doesn't cut GPD, but it cuts the corrections and it cuts the other agencies even more. The other one, as the good senator said, we should have voted for that because GPD only received a $2.2 million cut. How can that be the better way to go? How can that be, a balanced budget? The budget may be balanced because the numbers line up, but the operational needs of these departments and agencies are going to go out of whack, and we're going to be right back here because we have not done the work we wanted to do. Because I know what we all wanted to do, and we just haven't been able to do it. And while we may say that, we offer amendments and so forth, every amendment I've offered in this budget has never increased the appropriation level or increased the deficit. Every single amendment that I've offered to try and balance this budget, to make sure that the departments and agencies have the appropriation required to meet their mission, I have never increased the deficit or increased the appropriation level or increased the burden with regards to increasing the fees and the taxes. Because that's what this is. And while we may say that everyone's so brave for doing all this, let's be even more brave. Let's follow the law that we put in place. This bill is full of new fees. There's a law in the books that says you can't increase new fees without a public referendum. Why aren't we facing that fact? And as the good chair knows, it doesn't even say notwithstanding that provision of law for these new fees. So what are we doing? Are we just going to ignore that as we have ignored every rule during this whole 8 weeks? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Speaker Forbes. On the Palacios Amendment.
It's an interesting thing, Mr. Speaker, how time is circular. I recall not too long ago sitting in this hall, somewhere back here, going through a budget process not too dissimilar to what we're going through now. Presided over by some members who are no longer with us, and some members who are still with us, and some members who have returned to join the legislature. And it is amazing to me how some of the criticisms that are being leveled are diminished carbon copies of activities that occurred during precisely that budget session. That's one of the reasons why, Mr. Speaker, I, for one, tend to be cautious about making grand pronouncements, because I have this problem of remembering history. And I just don't have the stomach. Maybe it's a fault of mine to pontificate and criticize people for doing things not dissimilar at all from things that I might have participated in. I heard an implied criticism that the budget that we are amending through this act included lapses. I remember 2 budgets that I was part of that had heavy-duty lapses incorporated to balance them. And as a member of the minority, I didn't question that too much, because I recognized the fact that that's what they were doing. So I raised the issue, but I let it go. And everybody keeps telling me about what reality is. Well, here's what reality is. Reality is we need to balance the budget. And really, when you get right down to it, there's 2 ways to do that. You increase revenues, you reduce expenditures. If anybody feels in this room that they have another idea that they want to throw on the table to raise revenues, I'd be glad to hear it. I mean, maybe the chair would feel it was out of order. But me personally, somebody wants to throw out a new revenue-raising measure, I'm all ears. That doesn't necessarily mean I'll support it, but I might, depending on what it is. So tell me what it is. If people have problems with some of the cuts that have taken place in the absence of those increased revenues, or any motion to actually increase revenues, and they want to restore a cut to a department, you know, Senator Shimizu actually made a very compelling argument that I heard about the importance in rev and tax. And I might be convinced that that's something we need to do, but at the end of the day, if we do it, someone else has got to get cut. Or there has to be a concomitant increase in revenues to support that. You just can't have it both ways. Now, I guess I'm enough of an old horse to understand how this works. One of the oldest things you can do in a situation like this is fight against the revenue increases and fight against the cuts, which guarantees that there is absolutely no way that the budget will be balanced. And I'm not going to fault anybody for that, Mr. Speaker. But you know what? Spare me the lectures. You know, do what you're going to do, but don't shroud it in the flag. Because the truth of the matter is, nobody here wants to, well, no, that's not true. There are parts of the government of Guam that need to be cut. Are the cuts here severer than most of us would like? Probably. I think that's probably true. Is the governor going to have to exercise some real management to make this thing work? And when I say make it work, by the way, I'm not saying necessarily guaranteeing that every single human being who is hired is going to retain a job for life. When I say make it work, I mean that the services work. There already have been, and there exists already in the bill, as it is law, significant transfer authorities. There's going to be motions for more transfer authority. You know, we can give the governor the tools, but he's going to have to do a yeoman's job to make this thing work. I understand that. It's going to be a monumental challenge. I understand that. And part of the challenge is we are conforming as best we can, given the deficiencies in the bill was sent to us, with the general outline of the governor's proposal. But, you know, in the final analysis, Mr. Speaker, I don't have a problem with people wanting to restore things, as long as we understand that if we restore things, some of which may be great things to restore, we're going to have to do something on the other end, one way or another. It can't all be restoration. It just can't. Not because we don't want it, but because it can't. And I understand the desire to, constantly be going back and asking the departments every single time there's a change, what do you think, what do you think? But come on. I mean, reasonable people will understand that it's never happened that way, and the reason it's never happened that way is it would be so unwieldy as to be impossible to complete. And when I say never happened, I mean never happened under Republican legislatures, never happened among Democratic legislatures, never happened at all. It just can't work that way. Abraham Lincoln, in his inaugural address, used a line that I always like about, with malice towards none, with charity towards all. This is a rough time. And it's not so much rough for us, because in the end, what's rough for us isn't what's important. What's important is what's rough for people. And whatever frustration or aggravation members may feel is nothing compared to the aggravation and the frustration of the people of Guam. And I really strongly urge everyone in this room to remember the lessons of history. Remember the lessons of history and banish malice from their hearts to the greatest extent it is possible for us as fragile, frail, imperfect human beings, and try to adopt a measure of grace. For pretty much everybody that's in this room, I know that's not difficult, because there are many people in this room with far more grace than me. I just hope we stay on that path. And however people are going to vote on this amendment, however people are going to vote on the bill, for whatever reasons compel them to do either, vote yes or vote no, maintain the grace. Because you know what, folks? Once this goes down, we're back in here right away dealing with the next year's budget. And we're going to be dealing with other budgets. And, until the economy picks up, because I don't see anybody here being a big booster of, clobbering the people of Guam with excessive taxation. I don't see anybody. Until the economy picks up, there's going to be tough decisions every step of the way. And those tough decisions can be made with grace, and they can be made with dignity, or they can be made other ways. And I just don't think we ought to go down the path of the other ways, because it don't work. It's never worked. And we got to find a way to work together. Doesn't mean we all have to agree. It means we have to keep finding ways to work together. I do, not in the spirit of challenge, but in the spirit of genuine request, implore my colleagues that if there are things they are dissatisfied with in terms of the cuts, continue to move amendments. And those amendments may pass. Lord knows, last night there were some impassioned speeches about GPD. Guess what? You now have an amendment on the floor that removes this from GPD. I don't think anyone can accuse the majority members of this room of not listening, not being accommodating, and not trying to find consensus. Now, consensus may not be achievable for whatever reason, but we should still try and establish it as best we can. So, again, I open my heart and open my ears and open my mind to anyone who has anything they wish to say about making changes in these areas, so long as we understand that at the end of the day, if something gets increased, something must be decreased. And the only way around that is to increase the available revenue. Because it is not conceptually possible if we are to stay within the strict guidelines that we've established for this thing, to do otherwise. That's just logic. That's just common sense. That's just the way it has to be. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Spicio. By the way, Senator Palacios has not talked on this amendment at any time yet. So if you want to speak now, I would allow you, or you want to wait to be the last speaker. Okay, Senator Spicio.
Thank you very much, Ms. Speaker. Ms. Speaker, I listened intently to the retiring speaker, very eloquent speaker, no doubt, and a man who has a very good memory. It's apparent. But what he failed to say, Mr. Chairman, and I don't bring this up because I have malice in my heart or because I want to hash things out, but I bring this up so that in the hopes that we recognize how we got here and we all collectively move forward together. We're here today, Mr. Chairman, and the situation repeats itself. It almost seems like it's cyclical. In 2003, when the Democrats had the majority, we were faced with a very tough situation because the previous legislature, you were speaker of that, only passed a 5-month budget. Passed a 5-month budget with the existing revenue estimate, not taking into consideration what the true cash requirements were, the true cash projections versus the expenditure requirement. And the 27th Guam Legislature had to do the heavy lifting that the 26th Guam Legislature didn't want to do because it was an election year. And I don't fault anyone for that, Mr. Chairman. We're here again because this current legislature, 2.5 years now, has held the majority. And I hope once and for all that there's a meaningful recognition that the expenditures must match the revenues unless revenue enhancements are made. That we have no, and I agree with the senator from Barrigado, we have no business appropriating money when the cash is not there to back it up. We can give the governor all the transfer authority he wants. We can give him 100%. We can give him a lump sum budget. But unless this government takes in $50 million over the next 5 months, we're going to see some serious hardships occur. Mr. Chairman, I'm very concerned, like all of us are. And on our side, we've offered some very serious amendments to this Bill 74. Very important amendments that would once and for all require the Office of Finance and Budget to sit down with the administration and come up with a collective revenue projection so that there won't be any playing game. The legislature won't say it's the governor's numbers and the governor won't say it's the legislature's numbers. We want to prevent all that. We also have an amendment to require that individuals testifying before the legislature swear that the information they're giving is factual. That's very important too, Mr. Chairman. There's also amendments offered by other senators from both sides of the aisle. And maybe once and for all, we can face the people and they would believe us when we say that there's a serious financial crisis facing this island. It's hard for us to say that. It's hard for us to be told that by April 1st, if nothing happens, 2,200 employees will be laid off. We passed that deadline. In 2003, we were told if the administration does not get a bond borrowing authority, this government will collapse. You know, we're at that point where we can no longer play the shell game, and the games of finger pointing must come to an end. Mr. Chairman, it has to stop. It has to stop, and already we're seeing that one senator is saying that his amendment would have had a less of an impact than the Palacios amendment. But what we failed to talk about is what that 5% deappropriation would do. Every time I heard a member move an amendment to say this represents a 1% cut. For the case of the library, it's $12,000. But then nobody wants to talk about that 5% deappropriation, about $58,000. Nobody wants to talk about how the library alone would get a $72,000 impact. In the case of the Department of Corrections, I don't know how the Department of Corrections is going to get through the next 5 months with a $1.8 million cut. That's about 20%, Mr. Chairman. I don't know how most of these departments and agencies are going to exist. We're told for the last 2.5 years that education, health, and public safety are the highest priority, and this budget reflects that, and that education has been fully funded. But we know otherwise. But until there's a way where the transparency has reached an ultimate high or a level where people will start to believe what we're saying, then they would start to even recognize that these kinds of decisions need to be made. Up until yesterday, Mr. Chairman, the unbalanced budget was about $14 million. And then it went down to $11 million because of collective brainstorming and additional cuts that could be made to certain agencies. But that $11 million now is spread throughout all the different departments and agencies, except the 4 agencies that the will of the body identified to be the priority. And I don't think that that's the right way to go. I don't think, Mr. Speaker, we could simply give an appropriation to these agencies and set them up to fail. I'm hoping that right after this exercise, if you call it, because we still don't know what the governor will do with this bill. After this whole exercise, I really hope, and in doing the 2008 budget, we go and ask the departments and agencies to defend their budget based on their program requirements. That's what I like to see. I don't do these things to be difficult, Mr. Chairman. I do it because the people expect us to be honest. They expect that when we're giving them a history lesson, we remind them of some of the things that we've done on our side. And that's what I like to see here and now. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Thank you. Senator Palacios, you're the last speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, the amendment I propose recognizes, of course, the professed commitment of each and every member of this body, of course, in preserving the integrity of our public school systems, our public safety, judicial integrity, our health care, and of course, our frontline public servants, which are the mayors. I remember records will show that members of this body pleaded for the restoration of what would have been the automatic 5% the appropriation, and they succeeded. I was one of them. The Carver Amendment actually, when it came out, put this back again into cuts. And so the Palacios Amendment restored and is consistent with previous commitment that these agencies should be exempted, even though they may be subject to 30% the appropriate transfer authority. Now, I say this, that to not support the Palacios Amendment is to not support the exemption for the mayor's office, not support the exemption for the courts. To not support the Palacios Amendment is to not support the public school system's exemption, the hospital exemption, the Attorney General's exemption, and the police exemptions. And again, records will show that we are unified in this. We march in unison in preserving the original budget level for these agencies. And so today I say to my colleagues, those that profess that public safety, hospital, the public school systems is priority, I say to you, don't say it. Today, show it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, on the Palacios Amendment, I know there's objection to it. So as many as are in favor of the Palacios Amendment, signify by raising your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. There's 9 votes. Motion carries. We'll take a recess. Let me just organize this amendments up here. of the hall is now called to order. Okay, Senator Calvo, you got it. Let me see. You got your amendment.
Yes, sir.
Okay. You got two amendments here.
Yes. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, the first amendment I have is, it states it's amend section 15 and delete 16 of the miscellaneous provisions chapter, and of course starting with section 15.
Okay, wait. Does everybody have a copy of this amendment? Okay. Okay. Can amend section 15. This is Senator Calvo's amendment. Amend section 15 and delete section 16 of the miscellaneous provision chapter. We'll have a second recess so I can talk to the clerk. They're all now close to, it's called to order. Senator Calvo, on your amendment.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, my amendment, it's 3 pages long. It's been passed out to the body, and it's to amend section 15 and delete section 16 of the miscellaneous provisions chapter. And in essence, what this amendment does, and I want to thank my primo, the member of the minority senator, in regards to helping me draft this amendment. What it basically does is it takes out the penalty portion of the reporting requirements compliance, and again with discussions with the senator as well as other senators, again, and with inclusion of amendments made by the minority senator in regards to penalties upon the director, as well as to complete the budget package which we have just dealt with over the past 2 days, where it is not a budget based on de-appropriation, but is a budget based on budget ceilings for all agencies of the government of Guam. This is what this amendment attempts to do. It's a deletion of the penalties portion in regards to de-appropriation of funds.
Okay, on the Calvo amendment, but before I recognize anybody, the chair has been inundated with so many amendments up here. So I would like to request that everybody that has an amendment, please just keep it, and then, give the chair and have it pass out so that we can be orderly. There's so many amendments in front of me that it'd be very difficult for me to get it in order. So once I recognize you, just give it to me. Okay, on the Calvo's amendment, Senator Wampat.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, yes, I'm glad to hear that the senator is actually removing this portion of the appropriation of the funds, and but what I do not want to happen here is I do not want the language that I had proffered earlier about weeks ago, in which then rather than to have everyone in the department and agencies, of course, suffer as a result of the head of that particular department or agency, that the amendment that I've included would have been deleted. So what I would like to do, Mr. Chairman, and if you can follow with me on section 2, where it has ABC, I would like to submit then that portion of my amendment and to come right after C, and it'll be a new section. And what this basically does, Mr. Chairman, is that regardless then what the source is, and that if there is any a failure to comply in reporting, that it would not be the entire department that would suffer, but rather that of the director, deputy, and the CFO. The other thing here as well, since the directors, when they heard that this had passed, basically had provided some input to the legislature, saying that is it possible to go ahead and make, they're accepting of this happening, but rather the new inclusion here is that to have their gross salary per period and the gross salaries per pay period, that 20% instead for the remainder of the fiscal year, that it be taken out during the pay period and not at the end of that fiscal year. So that is the new change. I've gone ahead and incorporated the other amendment that had passed as part of this sentence was when Senator Lohan had also indicated that, and that's the last portion that was included in that amendment, that portion we didn't want to lose as well. So it's all in this amendment. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, the amendment of Judy Wampet, okay, the amend Senator Calvo's amendment relatives to Senator Wampet. Just wanted to make sure, okay, this is your amendment. Amends Senator Calvo's amendment relative to amending Section 15 of the Miscellaneous Provision chapter by replacing all language contained in the amendment after Section 2C with the following, right? Okay, this is an amendment to the amendment. Okay, on the amendment to the amendment, the Wampet's amendment, Senator Gutherts.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think this amendment is a very prudent amendment. It holds our managers in the executive branch, departments and agencies, and within our autonomous agencies accountable for reporting requirements. And that's where it should lie. The responsibility to ensure that the required reports are properly transmitted within the timelines established by law truly does rest on the department head, agency head, and his management team, inclusive of the fiscal officer and the deputy director. Over the years, I think we've gotten very sloppy in the government of Guam and have not been serious about meeting reporting requirement deadlines. A number of the problems we're experiencing today in the government of Guam, particularly with reference to cash and financial issues, is because of a lack of updated data which is provided to the proper offices for review and evaluation and for analysis. So this amendment of Senator Wanpat would hold the leaders of these departments and agencies personally responsible for their acting to meet the reporting requirements. Previously, as you know, the entire agencies were held hostage. And if agency did not report within the timelines on its financial activities for a particular quarter, then the agency budget was deappropriated. And so the agency suffers, and hence the public suffers who depend on those agencies for services. Now we are placing in the proper place the liability for not meeting the reporting requirements. And I 100% support Senator Wampat's amendment. Thank you.
Okay, on the Wampat's amendment to the amendment, Senator Blas.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, if I can request for a recess, I am working with the author of the amendment on this thing. There is a technical problem here that I think that we need to work out. No, 1 minute.
Okay, we recess, and I'll give you an ample time to make the change. Okay, recess. We recess because we're awaiting a clarification of the Wampat's amendment as being amended by Senator Blas. Okay, so do you have copies of the amendment that's being proposed by Senator Blas? Okay, now on the Blas amendment to the Wampat amendment. Okay, any objection? Okay, without objection, then so ordered. Okay, now, on the Wampet's amendment as amended to the Calvo's amendment. Okay, on that motion, without objection, so ordered. Okay, now on the main motion of Calvo as amended by Senator Wampet and Senator Blas, on that motion, without objection, carried. Okay, Senator Calvo, you have one more amendment.
Oh, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, my next amendment is to delete sections 13 of Chapter 6 of miscellaneous provisions relative to the deappropriation of funds and insert a new section relative to the deappropriation of funds as follows. And
Senator Calvo, just hold a second so that I want to make sure that everybody has a copy of this. Okay, everybody has a copy of the amendment. Continue on, Senator Calvo.
This is basically to complete the amendments that I proffered a little bit early on, sir, in regards to a budget based on budget ceilings rather than deappropriations, and elimination of deappropriation penalties as a result of non-compliance to reporting requirements.
Okay, on the Calvo's amendment, without objection, carried. Senator Judy Guthertz.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and Mr. Chairman and colleagues. I have an amendment. It was distributed yesterday, late in the evening, dealing with the prohibition on the use of appropriations to fill vacant positions.
Prohibition?
Yes.
What? Okay.
It's to add a new section to the miscellaneous provisions regarding prohibition on the use of appropriations to fill vacant positions.
You know, I got two amendments that on my desk here. One that says add a new section blank to the miscellaneous provision chapter as follows: moratorium on business
No,
privilege
that's-
stat
that's-
exemptions.
That's not the one, Mr. Chairman. I
And
have
you
three.
a
I have
review of
three.
business-
Please, Mr. Chairman, can we recess for 1 second? I'll get you a copy.
Okay, we would
Thank you.
have a recess for a second. You vacant positions, right?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Guthertz.
This act that we're working on now, also known as Bill 74, attempts to deal with the financial shortfalls of the government for the remainder of the fiscal year. I offer this amendment for the following purposes. Prohibition on the use of appropriations to fill vacant positions. Upon the effective date of this act, appropriations made pursuant to Public Law 28-149, Public Law -28150, or as contained in this act, shall not be used for the purpose of hiring full-time employees to fill vacant positions within the departments, agencies, and instrumentalities of the executive branch of the government of Guam, except as follows: teachers, guidance counselors, school librarians, school health counselors, one-to-one school aides for children with special needs, special education professionals, and staff providing direct student services and on-call substitutes, attorneys, nurses and doctors, temporary survey workers employed by the Department of Labor for the purpose of conducting employment surveys, licensed healthcare professionals, auxiliary service positions at the Guam Memorial Hospital, the Department of Mental Health and Substance Abuse, and the Department of Public Health and Social Services, faculty positions of the University of Guam and the Guam Community College, youth service workers and youth service worker assistants, and uniformed police, fire, corrections, and other related public safety positions, positions within the Mayor's Council of Guam, positions appointed directly by Imagilahin Lahin Guhan, revenue agents, and other positions within the Department of Revenue Taxation related to the collection of government revenues and processing of income tax returns, and federally funded positions matching and 100%. Of course, the purpose here is to ensure that the departments and agencies and instrumentalities of the executive branch do not somehow continue to hire additional new personnel unless they are those in the categories defined herein. I'm very concerned, Mr. Chairman, that unless we include this provision in this bill, that we may see some poor decisions made that will further exacerbate the financial condition of this government. And I do not think it's fair for any classified employee who might be impacted by our current shortfalls to perhaps be furloughed or lose their jobs while other people are being hired. Thank you very much.
Okay, on the Gotthard's amendment. Okay, Senator Tenorio.
I do have one additional language I'd like to add to be, Mr. Chairman, and this pertains to both the Attorney General and the Public Defender Service Corporation. Under B, it says attorneys, and I have an amendment which has been handwritten, but it'll need to be copied and passed around. But it adds the words, comma, investigators and legal support personnel. And that's the extent of it. If the body wants to have it reproduced, I can have it passed out. But the purpose of this is because those agencies...
Investigators and what?
Investigators and legal support personnel. So, Mr. Chairman, this deals with the Attorney General and the Public Defender and other crucial agencies that need to fill vacancies if they need to fill those positions. So I think we need to expand a little bit more beyond attorneys.
Senator Blas, on the Gotthard's amendment.
The motion is already done, sir?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, on the Tenorius amendment, and the Tenorius amendment is on subsection B, attorneys, is that semicolon 2, investigation and legal support services? I think, yeah, you take the semicolon after the attorneys and put it after support personnel, legal support personnel. So, okay. On that motion, without objection? Okay, so ordered. Now on the Gotthard's amendment. Okay, Senator Blas.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, and I'm preparing it right now, but actually it's a very minor amendment to the Gotthard's amendment. It's located on L, subsection L, federally funded positions, is in the parentheses before matching the words at least 50%. 50% matching.
Okay, the Blas amendment is on sub-item L. Before, there's parentheses on matching and 100%. He wants to amend it to put down at least 50% and 100%.
I just have a question for the author of the amendment, real quick.
Okay, Senator Tenorio on the Blas amendment.
My only concern here is I know that there are varying levels of matching funds, and will this eliminate positions that receive 25% or 33%, and whether that would compromise certain agencies? I know federal funds go to a variety of different agencies, and there are different levels. So that's the only question I have for the proposer of the amendment.
Will you yield to that, Senator Blas?
Yes, sir, I will. And thank you for the question. This in fact, there are different funding levels. There are funding levels that are as low as 10% federal, 90% local. And recognizing that some of these positions are, critical. Again, it's the intent of this body, to try to make sure that we stay within our means, and quite honestly, over the next 5 months, so I think that some of these programs, can do without those. So, and that's why I proffered that.
On the Blas amendment to the amendment and amend as amended. Okay, any objection? Okay, no objection. On the Gotthard's amendment as amended and further amended. Okay, on Senator Wampet.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to also make an amendment actually to delete on A and the staff providing direct student service and on-call substitutes. When you say providing direct student services, you're basically including everyone. And then on the on-call substitutes, we are now in the month of May. They will be out in a month, and I'm hoping that they're not going to go and start hiring a whole bunch of substitute teachers. Currently, I can tell you right now that there are substitute teachers that are being used for everything else other than to substitute.
Okay, let me just clarify your amendment. Okay, what do you wanted to delete the last line?
Yes, of A.
And staff providing direct student services and on-call substitutes. Okay, on the Wampet's amendment, any objection? Okay, no objection. Carried. Now, on the Gotthard's amendment, as amended and further amended and continued to be amended, Senator Gotthard's, anybody else before I recognize Senator Gotthard's? Okay, none. Senator Gotthard's, you're the last speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think just very quickly, this amendment really is what I would like to call good public administration. It requires us to be very prudent about how we handle our human resources henceforth for this fiscal year, and makes it very clear what the priorities should be in this government. Thank you very much.
Okay, on the Gotthard's amendment as amended and continue to be amended, without objection, so ordered. Okay, let me see. I got Edward J.B. Calvo, Senator Calvo.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, the next amendment I have is to add a new section blank to Chapter 3, and this is appropriation for textbooks. And before I read the amendment, I do want to, again, thank members of the body. We had a very productive working session yesterday trying to find ways to balance this budget. And in it, we looked for areas of consensus where we could de-appropriate with putting minimal harm into the...
Okay, Senator
and anyway, there's the amendment.
Before you explain now, just to make sure that everybody has a copy of this amendment, it would, to add a new section to Chapter 3, Section Appropriation for Textbook, Section 8, Subsection A, Part 1, Chapter 2 of Public Law 28-68 is amended to read blah, 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 blah. And anyway, I would just want to make sure everybody got it. Okay. Senator Calvo, you're
again, thank you, sir. Then, Mr. Chair, the motion is to amend the number from fiscal year 2006 from $3,500,000 to $1,500,000.
Okay, Senator Wampet, on the Calvo's amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to amend or propose, rather amend his amendment by including a new section added onto this chapter, and it actually amends a legislation, a current statute And what this would do then is that it would correct again several things. If you notice, like the district rather than the Guam Policy Board, that's done throughout. But on the second page, actually, what this would call for is that on a rotational basis, that there would be an extension of the textbook adoption, not every 5 years, but it would have been extended now an additional 2 years. What this would do, Mr. Chairman, is that it would also.
I
you
don't
can
have
get
your
your
amendment.
copy again. It's you should be stapled, I think. I'm terribly.
No, it's just a second recess. Senator Wampet, you have the floor.
No, Mr. Chairman, I've.
So you want to withdraw your
You're right, I'm
amendment
going to
then?
withdraw
Okay.
it, and then I'll do
Any
it later.
objection? No. Okay. Senator Pangilinan, you object? Okay, no, on to just withdraw her amendment. Okay. On the withdrawing of Senator Wampet's amendment, without objection. Ordered. Now, on the Calvo's amendment, Senator Pangilinan.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I attended the roundtable discussions with regards to both the Guam Public School System Administration and management, as well as the Board of Education members, with regards to the actual needs of the textbooks. And while I'll give, some leeway with regards to the determination of the amount here that's being left out of the original appropriation, I didn't come away with their convinced that this was the number. And I don't think there were any other subsequent roundtable meetings discussing the textbooks from the last one that I attended. There were still some questions with regards to what is covered under the textbooks. For example, collateral classroom materials. And while the orders for textbooks were not needed in certain instances, the issue of collateral materials, workbooks, and such were still unquantified at that time. And I feel that while there was great progress, that perhaps, not perhaps, but almost certainly, 3,500,000 would not be the final number required to ensure that every child receives the textbook or the collateral material that he needs to make sure that learning happens in the classroom. I'm not convinced from those meetings that 1.5 million is also the answer. And therefore, I definitely stand in objection to this amendment for those reasons. Now, I'm sure that there may be the chairman of the committee or the vice chairman of the education committee may have more information that were discussed outside of the roundtable meetings that I attended, but I was not privy to that. And if they enlighten me on that, then perhaps I may have a different opinion. But at this time, given the current information that I have, I don't believe that this is the adequate amount. The other thing, of course, is that we still really haven't quantified what books are out there in the schools. The inventory is still up in question, and that was one of the work that was being done by the committee to try and ensure that we get an inventory and that we determine that every child that needs a textbook has one. The ultimate, of course, is that every child that uses a textbook in the classroom can take it home and can work with that textbook at home. And we know, at least from the meetings that I attended, that that is far, far, far from the case that we have today. And that there are individuals and children in our schools at all levels that don't have a book they can take home, that don't have the textbook or the collateral learning materials, that we hear every day of teachers indicating that there are not enough textbooks in the classrooms and so forth. So, again, I must object to this amendment, given the unquantified impact that this will have on the textbook orders, given the information that has been made available to at least myself, and I'm sure other members of this body at that time. I would, it really is, if you take a look at it, this cut of $2 million from a $3.5 million appropriation is a 70% cut almost to the appropriation for textbooks. We are cutting the other departments and agencies 15, 20%, but for textbooks we're cutting 70%. We're leaving the judiciary and the AG untouched, but we're cutting the appropriation to the Department of Education for textbooks for the children by 70%. Where is the rationale? Where is the, given the information, where is the sense in this? I just can't understand that. I would like to make an amendment that we cut the AG by $250,000, and we cut the judiciary by $250,000, and we increase this appropriation by at least $500,000, Mr. Speaker. I just think that, to cut this much without the quantification that I believe is necessary to give me a sense of comfort that we are doing the right thing, I just can't do it. I can't support it, Mr. Speaker.
To recess. There's a request for 1 minute. So we'll have 1 legislative minute recess. On the Calvus amendment, okay, is there any objection? Of course, there's an objection. Yes, Senator Lujan, you're recognized on the Calvus amendment.
We're still, this is not an amendment to an amendment, it's on the Calvo amendment, right? As well? Or
there's no amendment to the Calvus amendment right
just,
now.
Yeah, Mr. Speaker, I as well stand in great concern about these figures here. Over the past, this would be 2, 4, going on my 6th budget cycle, basically, Mr. Speaker, and I stand in great concern about this. And almost budget after budget, there were concerns about appropriations for textbooks. And although I know that a great portion of the textbooks now are, I guess, being funded through federal sources through the direct instructions. But even that, at this point, Mr. Speaker, I'm uncomfortable in the amount of cut, because it's not, as as former Speaker Ben had said, there are no clear directions as to where we're going and all that. And as as in earlier weeks, when we looked at revenue projections and we've asked administrative officials regarding how did you come about these figures, they still weren't clear. And this is a devastating cut. This is a big cut. It said 70% cut to textbooks for learning with our students. So I'm not quite convinced at this point. I don't know how this number was derived. Again, we've read, we know there's sources, direct instructional resources, federal sources, although I just don't quite have, I hope that I'm corrected in this thing, but as the former speaker as well, there are no clear indications that this won't be a great effect to learning in the classroom. So I stand with great concern, and I'm not very comfortable in this amount, most especially directly to learning in the classroom, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much.
Okay, I'm calling about a minute recess. Huh?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, if there's anyone, I guess, who would like to really argue about this, probably would be me, having been a school principal and always been trying to track textbooks and making sure we have textbooks and making sure we have policies to collect textbooks and all that. And as much as, there may be major problems with the textbook inventory, and keeping track of textbooks and collecting. I mean, this what is a perennial problem. But what I want to provide today, at least some information in the roundtable discussions that I've had, with officials from GPSS, and also, yes, the previous speaker from Manila actually was correct in participating in these roundtable discussions. This afternoon, I made a call to GPSS to actually find out whether they have started to use any of these '07 monies, and I was informed by Mr. Tahaji that they have already expended $2.5 million of the '06 money for this particular school year we're in. The '07 money, he said, they have not even started to receive yet to purchase for textbooks for the new school year. And it's always ordered 1 year in advance, usually every March. And they have already gone beyond the March deadline. And the question that was asked of them then, at least to use the '07 monies, and how it is to be used, how much is to be used, and what are the textbooks, and what are the levels, and what are the costs. Right now, for all of the elementary schools, every single elementary school, with the exception of Agana Heights Elementary, they are under DI, so all of their textbooks, yes, are being purchased out of by federal funds. Agana Heights Elementary here, they've given us a list of all the books that they're going to need from grades from K to 5. It will come to a total of $31,164.91, and that's just in the elementary level 1 school. The summary of middle school orders and high school orders, it will be in the language areas, language arts and Chamorro textbooks, and just roughly, without using a calculator, in the middle schools there's 80,000 that's going to be needed for the language arts for all the middle schools. And then in the language content area, there's nothing. For the teacher editions for all the middle schools is $910. And then when you go on to the high school, the language books, both language arts, world language, and Chamorro language, the amount came out to $261,933.03. Then the content, which are the student workbooks, came out to $23,620.71. And then the teacher editions are $7,683.77. Roughly, this whole amount so far, at least just for textbooks that we're looking at, is $372,000 or even $375,000 so far, at least in the last roundtable discussions that we had with GPSS officials. And the amount from 206, according to Mr. Tahaji, has been $2.5 million has been expended, but not a penny yet of the '07. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Senator Forbes.
Just to add on to Senator Wumpet's remarks, I think it's really important that folks understand that aren't that closely involved in this situation the extent to which the direct instruction program has impacted requirements for textbooks. With the exception of Agana Heights Elementary, every single elementary school basically has their entire materials, workbooks, textbook requirements picked up now by the federal government. So what was previously a demand at the elementary level for workbooks, for things of that nature, for textbooks, for teacher editions, for all that stuff, that's all off the table now, because it's all provided essentially through the federal grant that administers DI. Also, it is true that DI materials do not go home with students, but that's part of the DI program, is it happen in the classroom. Furthermore, and one of the interesting things we discovered in the course of the roundtables is in middle schools, this upcoming school year, DI is going to be operating in the language arts area specifically, which is the only area of new textbook certification requirements so far. in the language arts area, DI is going to replace a lot of the traditional language arts instruction in the middle schools. As students are coming up through the elementary school system and they're coming into middle school, it's the intention of GPSS to continue them in DI and follow them through the middle school area. So basically, when you look at the language arts area, the primary area of need is in the high schools, which, I beg everyone to accept is not the bulk of the student population, although it is a very substantial number. Another thing to point out, and Senator Wampat was moving and then decided to withdraw, and she'll move it later, an amendment that was going to change the adoption period for new textbooks from 5 years to 7 years, which would obviate the requirement to purchase an entire new set of language arts books for those areas where language arts textbooks are still necessary. And in the conversations during the various roundtables and otherwise with GPSS about whether or not the current language arts series would be acceptable for another 2 years, the response was absolutely. The current text is still good. We may need to replace in some grade areas some disposable materials like workbooks and things of that nature, but the textbooks are fine. So this, if this readoption is pushed off for 2 years, it has a further impact on reducing the requirement for new textbooks in this one area. As far as we know, and we've talked to them quite a bit, no other new textbook series is being adopted except for language arts, and even that won't have to be adopted if the law is changed, because the board seemed very comfortable to me with the notion of pushing that forward for another 2 years, which makes replacement books basically almost all that is required. Another aspect of this that I just want to bring to the attention of the body is that if there is no adoption of a new text for language arts, then it also removes any requirement under law to provide textbooks to the private schools. Because under the law, the only textbooks that are provided to the private schools for free are those textbooks that are newly adopted by GPSS. If the private schools require replacement textbooks, they have to purchase them. So that cost is relieved as well. So there's a considerable degree of cost here that can be relieved. And, the speaker previous, Senator Wampat, is absolutely right. The two senators I spoke to the most about this when this proposal came up, because I was obviously nervous myself as the oversight chair for education about this, but the two people I spoke to were both educators. And, no one would defend the prerogatives or the needs of the school system more than they. And I think, it's pretty obvious that this will be okay, especially in light of the fact that the administration hasn't released dime one of this appropriation yet anyhow. So the ability to expend it on a timely basis has been severely compromised. I want to assure the body as well that, within days of our completing this task that we are engaged in, all of us who are involved in the committee intend to immediately begin the discussion with GPSS, not just on this matter, but on a series of matters. So if there is any difficulty that arises, and I anticipate none, frankly, based on the information we've received, but if there is any difficulty, rest assured that, as it has for the first part of this year, the Committee on Education is going to pursue it very diligently. And when I say that, sure as heck just don't mean me. I mean those members of the minority who've attended every single meeting and attended the school visits and have done everything else as well. So, I just want to make that clear to allay any major concerns that people may have and follow up on the discussion so far.
Okay, on the Calvo's amendment, there was an objection. So as many as are in favor of the Calvo's amendment, please signify by raising your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7,
votes. Motion pass. Senator Calvo on the other amendment.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Again, the next amendment, Mr. Chair, is to add a new section blank to Chapter 3. And then this is the Quentun Salapi the Principals Fund, Section 2D, Part 1, Chapter 2, Public Law 28149, is amended to read. And then there is the full deletion of that appropriation.
Okay, on the Calvo's amendment, okay, there is an objection then. As many as are in favor, okay, can you bring the senators in that are outside? Okay, as many as are in favor of the Calvo's amendment, signify by raising your hand. 1, 2, 3. Okay, motion pass. Okay, Senator Wampet, let's see, you do have two amendments.
Yeah, yeah, you got it?
Yeah, Senator Wampet, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, the amendment I have actually is it's a new section, and it's from Chapter 4, Division 1 of Title 17, GCA, and what this would do is actually first of all, I just went ahead and made the corrections, removing all the districts of education to making the corrections to the Guam Education Policy Board. But on the second page, where it actually calls that the freeze grade level in which the books are normally selected and ordered on a rotational basis, not to exceed 5 years, is amended now to 7 years. What this would do then is that
Senator Wampet, just so I can follow.
you can't.
Okay, with the amendment that we're talking about right now is the one that says replace Section 21 of Chapter 4.
Section 4104 of Chapter 4. The stapled copy that you found earlier, yeah, in the back.
Okay, because you got a second
4104.
amendment here too.
Oh yeah, I haven't done that yet.
Okay. Let me just organize here. Okay, Senator Wampet, now you're recognized in order, and okay, please describe proposed amendment. Okay, new section 4104, Chapter 4, Division 1 of Title 17, Guam Code annotated, right?
Yes,
Okay.
and it's going to be
We're on the same
amended
page.
to read then as follows. And what this does, like I said, is I took out the actual wordings in the GCA of 4104 and made the corrections, from districts of education or boards of education to the correct term, which is the Guam Education Policy Board, which is a minor thing. On the next page is the amendment, main amendment primarily, in which to do the extension of the selection and ordering of a selected textbook. It's different textbooks per year, and the extension is from 5 to 7 years. Research also have shown that 7 years basically is the maximum number of years in which you would have any textbook to be part of your current textbook listing. This does not, however, mean that just because the board has adopted a new textbook means that you're going to go and just throw away all your textbooks. They're normally kept anyway as resources, and I found from experience that many of the teachers, still continue to even use sometimes the older textbooks, or the textbooks that are no longer in the adopted list, and then when the new textbooks come, they don't even use those. I had that personal experience when I was newly assigned to a school a middle school, and in my tour of the school, tour inspection, I found a closets full of brand new adopted science textbooks, workbooks, kits for experiments, totally consumed in cockroaches and termites. Brand new textbooks on the adopted list, never used, because the teachers didn't like that particular adopted textbooks and preferred to continue with a textbook that was removed from the adopted list. Now, granted that may be one isolated incident, but what this would not do, of course, and we're encouraging, of course, the department, is that even though you remove them and adopt a new book, so that you always maintain them and keep at least a class set always for additional resources for the children and teachers to use in the classroom. We met with the board as well on this, and they are definitely in agreement, and basically asked if this would be done. And then it's actually in the bill form as well, but I've decided to actually put it in here to assist the department in its adoption of the new textbooks. And it doesn't mean they're not going to order, like I said, the language arts and the language textbooks, because that's on the list to order for this year. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, on the Wampets amendment, any objection? Okay, without objection, so ordered. Okay, Senator Wampat has one more amendment, isn't it? Okay, this has to do with the replace Section 21?
Yes, it's replace
4
Section 21 of Chapter 4, which was on the floor amendment. It's actually floor amendment number 60, because we worked with the clerks on this to make sure that we actually use the proper, to cite rather the correct sections and chapters, because we don't want to misquote anything. So what this would actually do then is to repeal and reenact the following. And we've actually made many of the corrections. There were only two things that are being corrected here, and that's why we decided to do a repeal and reenactment, was because, one, we had a different section. But the second thing here was that there was an amendment that was put in the budget 2 budgets ago, which was also to include at that time a salary increase for truant officers. And that has been addressed already. And they're not a part of every 3-year compensation plan, which would bring them up to the national level. So that I've made the motion then in this particular amendment is to delete that, and that this will strictly be only for the positions listed here in the amendment. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, on the Wampets amendment, without objection. Okay, so ordered. Okay, we'll have a brief recess. Brief recess. Recess until, see, right now it's 20 to 6, 7:30? Okay, until 7:30. Okay, so we're recessed until 7:30. The Committee of the Whole is now in session. I got your amendment here. Well, she will offer it. Senator Guthertz.
Mr. Chairman, I have 3 amendments to offer. And the first amendment adds a new section to the miscellaneous provisions chapter as follows. And this is for Bill 74. No permanent classified employee of any department or agency of the government of Guam shall be subject to layoff or furlough before the following categories of employees have been first subjected to layoff or furlough action within said department or agency. All layoff or furlough actions shall be imposed in the following order. Part-time, short-term, or seasonal employees, unclassified employees, shall be considered short-term or seasonal. Provisional employees, temporary or limited-term employees, and probational initial employees. Mr. Chairman, this simply reiterates, as part of the bill, laws or a law that already exists. But I think it's very important that we make a strong statement as a legislature in order to ensure that the respect for the classified service of the government of Guam, the merit system, is reinforced. Thank you very much.
Okay, on the amendment, Senator Calvo.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, again, I appreciate the amendment being made by the senator. Again, it's for the purpose of protecting first our permanent classified positions. Again, my only concern is I don't have a fairly good understanding of again, the part-time, short-term, seasonal employees, provisional employees, temporary, limited-term employees, probational employees. I guess one of the things that strikes me is the census workers. And I do know that census work will be coming. In fact, I'm not too sure whether it is this year where the census will be occur. Was it 2010?
Mr. Chairman,
I guess my only concern is I want to ensure that I agree with the permanent classified employee being the last to be touched. But what I'm concerned again is when you have language that has every one of these employees first, and could it have an impact in the provision of a service? Again, it's a very general question. So again, that's just my concern, and I don't know whether if the author of the amendment can at least give me some confidence that we may not be endangering any particular type of service.
Certainly. Thank you,
Okay,
Mr. Chairman.
Senator Guthrie, would
Thank
you
you.
respond to that?
Yes.
Or Hugh?
As you recall, previously, the last amendment that I introduced dealt with the filling of positions. And one of the categories that was exempted from hiring freeze was the positions that are described as temporary survey workers employed by the Department of Labor for the purpose of conducting employment surveys. Now, if you look at this amendment, Mr. Chairman, it talks about temporary or limited term employees, probation employees, provisional employees, part-time employees, etc. But in this other measure, it identifies those employees that are hired to do survey work for the Department of Labor, which normally handles the census survey, are exempted. And that was the earlier amendment that we passed.
Okay. Is that clear, Senator Calvo?
I just like to have one follow-up question. I just thought when I'm reading the language on the first one, part-time, short-time, or seasonal employees, and unclassified employees that shall be considered short-term or seasonal. And let me just give an example. In one particular agency where you have a director and a secretary, the question I would like to ask the author of the amendment, if this were to pass, would there then be a requirement that there would have to entail first a termination of a secretary or a director before any other positions would be touched within a particular department?
Mr. Chairman, the language, I'd be happy to respond.
Yeah. Go ahead, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The language here is an exact replication of the language that presently exists in the personal rules and regulations of the Department of Administration that guides the process for furloughs and layoffs. This is the exact same language. All we're doing is reiterating the same language into this bill. So if you refer to the Department of Administration Personnel Rules and Regulations for the executive branch of the government of Guam, the same language appears.
Okay, Senator Wampet on the Gutierrez Amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I know that there's a, in the last budget, I think it's 28-150, we had actually allowed for other individuals that I don't, I know it says here other positions previously also for revenue and taxation. So I guess those guys would not be part of it. When I see provisional employees, limited term employees, and probational, I'm thinking primarily, of course, a GPS, because that's where we have provisional types of professions, and I want to make sure that by stating provisional employees, would see that go into other employees also within the Department of Education, where they do hire other people part-time for special needs and contracts as well. Or can you tell us maybe where are other places that actually use these terms other than the ones that I'm familiar with at GPSS, the limited term employees? Would that be like the all these new program coordinators that were created as well?
I would say.
Will you hear?
I can't answer.
Senator Gutierrez, yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The civil service laws and the Department of Administration rules and regulations use these categories, these terms, and they also set out the same listing in terms of the process as to how, if furloughs were to occur or layoffs, how they would be initiated. In the previous amendment that we passed dealing with the filling of vacant positions in the government of Guam, in Section A, very clearly it states teachers, guidance counselors, school librarians, school health counselors, one-to-one school aides for children, special needs, special education professionals are exempted from the hiring freeze. I believe that should take care of Senator Wampat's concern.
Senator Wampet, still got the floor.
My other question then, because the senator said that these positions are listed under civil service, so and I'm wondering whether is the language here different from what is required from civil service? I mean, is it already outlined in civil service already that there's a process to follow?
Yes.
And
yes.
Is this within that, or is it something new? Is it to make it stronger? Are we just reiterating it, or is it because maybe because of the move that was made to take some of these employees and put them to DOA, that maybe now to carry out these particular functions to ensure that we do protect the classified employees is no longer in place because of that move, and that this would necessitate then, having this again in place in law. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, on the Gutierrez Amendment. Any objection? Okay, I'm sorry. Senator Gutierrez, will you yield to the question of Senator Wampet?
Senator, Mr. Chairman, the language in the Department of Administration rules and regulations are still current, still in place, and the language in the civil service laws are still in place. This verbiage has not been repealed. It still does exist. All I am trying to do is just reiterate this as part of this bill so that we have a complete package where everything is in one place and everyone knows what the rules are.
Senator Wampat, is that sufficient? Would you like
Thank you,
Reese?
Mr. Chairman. Well, now, of course, my question would be is that if this is the exact language that's in the GCA right now, and
It's the personnel rules and regulations.
so I'm wondering then if there's going to be a need to actually put this again to I mean, I need, I guess, somebody else to answer this. I mean, if it's already in place in law, there's a section, a title, and all that, and a chapter that it's in, then is this necessary? I need some guidance here.
Senator Guthertz?
Yes.
Will you yield?
Thank you very much,
Okay,
Mr. Chairman. I think this is the exact language from the personnel rules and regulations of the Department of Administration, which apply to the executive departments and agencies of the government of Guam. They have the force of law because they went through the proper adjudication process
Yeah, the
years
AAA.
ago and were approved and put in place. They've been honored by the Civil Service Commission in the past, and my thinking was that it would be very valuable for us to codify it as part of Bill 74 so that we give proper guidance to all the departments and agency officials if there is a need to take some actions with respect to these areas. That was my intent, Mr. Chairman. The goal is to ensure that the merit system, the merit service of the government of Guam is properly respected. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Tenorio, then Senator Forbes, or Speaker Forbes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I know exactly what the lady is attempting to do here, and I think that the existence of the current provisions in the Department of Administration personnel rules and regulations probably would guide the furlough process that it currently exists. And I don't know if this on item 1 in parentheses unclassified employees shall be considered short-term or seasonal is currently in place. But if it is, then maybe, unless maybe legal counsel can lead me to believe otherwise, that would mean that the director and deputy director, and I guess at least those two positions in an agency would have to first lay themselves off before any classified employee of that agency would in fact be laid off or furloughed. And again, I'm not sure what the full force of effect would be if we put this as a section of the current law, since we already have promulgated rules and regulations of the Department of Administration which guide that process as it exists or is proposed to exist. So I'm a little concerned that I know exactly what the mover is trying to achieve, and I support it, but I think if we already have those systems in place through processes which have already undergone the scrutiny of the AAA, it may be that we may be repeating or being redundant in the process unnecessarily, and I'm a little concerned about the unclassified employees as it pertains to the directors who are in fact unclassified. So I raise that as a concern.
You're not asking, do you? Okay, Speaker Forbes.
The amendment, I think, is not at all a bad amendment, but again, there is that law of unintended consequences that we sometimes need to look at. For example, as the chair is very aware, there are some Guam entities that rely by design on part-time employees. For example, the what used to be called casual laborers at the Port Authority of Guam. The nature of that work, almost requires casual employees. At least this is what you've always told me, Mr. Chair. And do we want to say that before anything can happen, the port has to lose the entirety of its casual labor workforce? Would that really be something we wanted to do? The second thing kind of follows along what the speaker previous said. I don't have a problem with requiring the administration to lay off a very significant number of unclassified employees prior to taking any action with classified employees, but I don't know that it's a practical reality that you can completely denude the executive branch. And I don't think that's what the author intended to do, but I am concerned that that's what the effect of this way this is written will do, is that, you know, before anything could happen, every director, every deputy director, every member of the governor's office staff, and even other unclassified employees in the executive branch would have to be dismissed first. I would think that a compromise position might be to establish a percentage of unclassified employees that had to depart government service prior to any action being taken. And, you know, maybe we could take a brief recess and discuss what the proper percentage would be. But I think that might be a way to go that would be reasonable, because the general spirit of it, that you don't want to have a situation where classified employees get affected and the unclassified service has no effect whatsoever. I do agree with that. But I don't know that we would want to have language that might be interpreted, especially if it was being interpreted by someone in a hostile fashion, to say that everybody's got to go from the unclassified service, every single person, before anything can happen. Because then the effect is to just prevent it, and I don't think that's what the author intends. I have a sense of what the author's trying to do, and I think her intent is laudatory, but I think we might need to just clean up that language just a teeny bit.
You know, Speaker Forbes, is there any request or question that you want to? Okay, we'll have a brief recess. Senator Wampat.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to add an amendment, a sentence just above and before the word "no permanent," and it would read, "pursuant to the personnel rules and regulations of the Department of Administration, comma, then no, continue on for the rest."
Can you give that motion, you know, the amendment to the clerk? Okay, without any objection. Okay, motion carried. Okay, we dispose of that. Yeah. Wait. Okay, Senator Ben Pangilinan on the main amendment.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I support the amendment. You know, while we all try to play lawyer, and, you know, we all, I keep saying, there's a Chief Justice right up there. I don't know why we don't listen to him when we have a question of law, you know, but, and we all, you know, but I guess it's just we're trying to establish our intent here. And the intent is pretty clear. And I think once you establish the intent for the record, you know, you go to the plain reading of the law and so forth, and we have somebody there who's eminently qualified, and we can ask him what he would think. Of course, we can't guarantee that how he thinks is how the court will think. But we can be reasonably assured, given his tenure on both the Superior Court as well as the Supreme Court of Guam. But the intent is clear. Not only is the intent clear, the practice is clear, the record is clear, because the language is lifted from the Department of Administration personnel rules and regulations, which map out, of course, the process and the priorities with regards to the exercise of furloughs and layoffs. I feel pretty comfortable with the historical record, as well as the expression of the intent, as well as the language that's in there, because that language has gone through many years of review. I mean, it's not the first time we've discussed this language, given that it's not the first time we've had to implement furloughs and 32-hour weeks and such practices in the past, budgets and so forth. So given all the record that's been established, I feel comfortable with the amendment and the intent, and I support it. Thank you.
Senator Palacios, on the main amendment. Okay. Any other speaker on the amendment of Senator Gutierrez? Senator Gutierrez, here's the last speaker now.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and colleagues. We all know how difficult things are right now in our community and in our government, and we have a cadre of very hardworking, committed public servants in the government of Guam. They work throughout 60 different departments and agencies of the government. They work hard every day. They come to work every day. They are merit employees in the career service of the government of Guam. And my intent in offering this amendment was to ensure that the appropriate and legal practices required in our rules and regulations guide this process. And it's important that we reiterate it as a sentiment of the legislature, that we respect the rules and regulations that have been set up to guide this process in the event that it must be used, and that our career service will be respected. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, on the Gutierrez amendment, with no objection, so ordered. Senator Gutierrez, you got another amendment.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. The next amendment is to amend Section 15F and H, Chapter 5 of Bill 74 to read. Before I explain what this amendment will do, I'd like to say that in our effort to deal with the current challenges we face in our community and in our government, as you know, the governor asked us to do some adjustments to fees. And one section of the fee adjustment that was sent to the legislature by the governor was the section that deals with various types of games. And in our effort to accommodate the request of the governor to review and to consider an increase in some of the fees for machines that we find throughout our island for amusement purposes, in crafting that original language, there was an error, and I would like to correct it at this time. If you follow along with the amendment I'm presenting to you, the purpose is to amend Section 15F and H, Chapter 5 of Bill 76 to read,
Okay, wait.
etc.
Does everybody have a copy of the amendment? Okay. Now let me see. Would there be any question on the amendment?
No, it's the one that's dated
Yes.
May 3rd.
Okay.
Wait.
Well, is there any objection on this?
Wait, which one?
Okay, so ordered. Oh, what?
No, the one today. Wait a minute. Yeah. This is the one. May 3rd. May 3rd. It's the May 3rd version. May 3rd version. On the bottom it says
Does
May 3rd.
everybody have a copy of this? Okay. Is there any objection on the motion? Okay, so ordered.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That's
Okay,
great.
thank you, Senator Gutierrez.
I have one more. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Oh, yes. Now, the last amendment would add a new section to the miscellaneous provisions of this chapter of Bill 74. The title is review of business privilege tax exemptions. And it states, Mr. Chairman, and I'd like to explain this after I summarize the amendment. It would state that each business privilege tax exemption, exemption authorized
Senator
in,
Gothard's way, because I got
it's very good.
moratorium on business
Thank you.
privilege tax, and then you have moratorium on business privilege tax exemption.
Let's review of business privilege tax exemption. This is the latest version.
You see all the papers I got?
Review
Okay.
of business, that's the one. Review of business privilege tax exemption. You have it, Mr. Chairman? You have it?
Yes, I got it.
Okay, thank
Senator
you.
Gothard's.
Each business privilege tax exemption authorized in Section 26203 of 11 GCA shall be evaluated by the Legislative Tax Review Commission pursuant to Chapter 11 of 2 GCA, using the principles of economic efficiency, equity, simplicity, administrative feasibility, accountability, and for the purpose of economic growth. The Commission shall provide its evaluation of the exemptions and make recommendations for permanent repeal or reauthorization of said exemptions to Magulahi Guaha and Legislation Guahan by September 1st, 2007. Now, Mr. Chairman, the purpose of this miscellaneous provision is to solicit the professional guidance of members of the commission, the Tax Review Commission. It's already in legislation. It has to be impaneled by the governor and the speaker. But it's very important, Mr. Chairman, that we begin just to review, that we review the significance of the exemptions that have accumulated over the last 60 years, evaluate their importance, their usefulness to our economy, to our community, and perhaps if the commission would like to make appropriate recommendations to help guide this legislature and guide the governor. So that is the purpose, to do an analysis, an assessment, and to make recommendations. Thank you.
Okay, on the Gothard's amendment, that has to do with the review of business privilege tax exemption. Senator Blas.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I wholeheartedly support this amendment. I just have one question with regards to the intent, actually, recognizing that this is already a statute, that this commission already does exist by statute. I'm just wondering whether or not it is in our authority or purview to basically state when this statute or this commission should be impaneled. And maybe I can, as far as the recess, then use the wisdom of the Chief Justice and our legal counsel. And like I said, Mr. Chair, I do not have I love this amendment. I love this amendment. But are we overstepping our bounds? And he's saying no. Both saying no. Questions answered. Thank you.
Let's brief recess. Legislature's back. See, on the Gothard's amendment in terms of the review of business privilege tax exemption, is there any objection to this? Don't say la. Okay, without objection, then so ordered. Okay, Senator Rory Respicio. I don't know. I got a.
Thank
I
you,
got
Mr.
an
Speaker.
amendment here for you from you.
No, I had no further amendments. That probably passed already, or you just want to recognize me finally.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Okay. Thank you, Senator Respicio. Okay. On Bill 74 as amended, further amended, continuously being amended, Senator Pangilinan. Senator Ben Pangilinan.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the amendment I have that's being passed out.
Okay, that's everybody have a copy of the Pangilinan's amendment right now. Okay, go ahead and say it out.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we all spoke, of course, of our concern for the budget cuts that are occurring to what we think and we all feel are critical agencies of the government of Guam and their ability to survive given the, I'll use it, draconian cuts in some instances to these departments and agencies. And the fact that, we need to find a revenue source if we're going to restore any cuts. And so the amendment I have will do just that. The amendment I have, for one, would delete Section 32 of the bill, and that Section 32 basically is the section of the bill that would have clarified the visible GRT program to show how it's to be mapped out, or how it's to be the consumers to be informed. So it would delete Section 32 of the bill and repeal by adding a new chapter to, and then add a new chapter 7 to Bill 74. And it would repeal the visible GRT program so that we wanted to clarify it because there was confusion of how it's applied. And we actually implemented the visible GRT program when when the increase of the GRT went from 4 to 6, to give the consumer the opportunity to know that the prices of the goods were not as a result of the visible GRT, but actually what the component is of that increase. Now the 6% has been reduced to 4, and what we found, of course, which we're trying to clarify with Section 32, is that companies have used the visible GRT to tack on the 4% on top of a price that already had included 4% in most cases. And so it would just repeal the visible GRT program, go back to the way we were, where the price you see at the cash register, the price you see in the newspaper, the price you see on the store shelf is the price you will pay at the checkout counter. So there's no then voluntary program for a visible GRT. I spoke with Revenue and Tax on this, the effect of this. And the effect of the visible GRT would be to increase revenue collections by about $3.8, almost $4 million a year. And so what I have done, because of the fact that it will be only implemented over 5 to 6 months of this year, that the GRT program, the deletion of the visible GRT, would actually raise about $2 million. And so Chapter 7 would take that additional $2 million and appropriate it to the University of Guam in the amount of $500,000, to the Guam Community College in the amount of $250,000, to the Department of Revenue and Tax, which is so critical to the collection of all of the revenue increases that we have passed or have been included in this bill. If we increase these fees and so forth, and Revenue Tax doesn't have the processing manpower and the regulatory manpower to ensure that they're complied with, we won't realize the gain. The amnesty program and the processing of that and so forth, we won't see the gain. So we will actually increase the resources of the Department of Revenue and Taxation at $500,000. The Public Defender Service Corporation, we've funded fully the judiciary, we've funded fully the AG so that they can prosecute criminals, but to defend the most needy in our community that are serviced by the Public Defender Corporation, we've cut their budget. So this will restore $150,000 to that, and much more to me of a critical nature also is restoring $600,000 to the Department of Public Health and Social Services for medical services that we have cut to the tune of $2 million, so that we can at least bring some of the services back that would have suffered from the cut of $2 million. So when they say, what are we going to do to try and balance this budget? This proposal keeps the budget in balance, provides some real funding source for these critical departments and agencies, Mr. Speaker, and I ask my good colleagues, that I have laid out this proposal and ask for their support. Thank you.
Okay, on the Pangilinan amendment now, Senator Forbes, then Senator Calvo.
So if I'm to understand this correctly, when the Visible GRT program was created, it resulted in a loss of revenue. Is that what the mover is saying? Would he yield to that question?
Yes, absolutely, it did. It provided tax relief to the consumer by not having him pay tax on the tax. The problem was that some businesses took advantage of that, and rather than absorbing the 4% and just showing it, they actually added 4% on top of the hidden 4% that was already included in their price. So yes, it did result in a loss of revenue to the government of Guam, but it in some instances, some companies out there implemented it properly and resulted in a little bit of a tax relief to the consumer. Yes.
Okay, but there are some places that added it on but maintained the gross receipts tax in their pricing structure. Is that what
That's
you're saying?
correct. Yes.
So what this does basically, it repeals the entirety of the visible GRT, and we just go back to the status quo antebellum, so to speak.
Correct.
Now, when the conversation was entered into with the Department of Rev and Tax, they stipulated that $4 million annually is what they think was lost by the visible GRT?
Yes, between $3.8 and $4 million.
And they believe that for the balance of the fiscal year, $2 million can be collected?
Yes, they have more confidence in collecting the $2 million this fiscal year for the rest of the fiscal year with this program than the $30 million in amnesty.
That they themselves put forward to the Guam Legislature? Is that the amnesty you're talking about?
Yes, to me.
The one that they kept saying under questioning was guaranteed to bring in that kind of money?
I didn't hear them guarantee, but I said they were confident.
It came from them, so it
they said they were confident.
They were confident, huh? I don't have a problem at all, Mr. Speaker, repealing the visible GRT since I'm not the author of it, but I just want to know for certain that it is going to realize $2 million in revenue. I think there's a very famous case here of the application of the visible GRT. I don't know that one retailer would. Obviously, it has to be more than the most visible case, right?
Repeat the question.
There must be more than that one retailer, which is the most visible case.
Yes.
Of the visible GRT.
Yes.
Okay.
Oh yeah, there's quite a number. The gas companies all use it now. The movie companies, quite a few others. MCV.
Okay, just a matter of clarification now. This, please realize that this amendment, of course, has 3 sections, and the motion is to accept all 3 sections.
Could we divide the question, Mr. Speaker?
Well,
I'd like to move to divide the question.
The motion,
I think one and B and
No,
see.
the point is there's this is a procedural question. Is there any objection to dividing the question?
I think that would be
well,
a reason.
Mr. Speaker, if you divide the question, it may, and one section does not pass, then it moots the other section.
Possibly, but Mr. Speaker, it also
Not
allows.
necessarily on this one.
Okay.
Okay, so if we fought objection, then so ordered. Okay, we'll divide the question section 1, section 2, and section 3. On section 1
Mr.
of,
Speaker, can I, as the mover of the amendment, then switch the order of the division of the question and start from 3, 2, and 1?
Oh, no.
So is the other way.
No, well, the way that you present it right now.
Well, then can I have a 1 minute recess and I'll present it differently?
Oh, what's?
But if you repeal it, there's no revenues to identify. Why don't? I mean,
I don't.
Okay,
I think I still have the floor, don't I? Or maybe I don't. But
I'm sorry.
I was just thinking I still had the floor because I.
Yeah.
Well, it's my amendment. Couldn't I decide how to present it?
But it's already presented.
No, the
Then I request
the
that
motion
I
was made to
withdraw
divide the
my
question.
amendment to allow to present it in a different format.
So, on the we divide the question. Well, we will. And Senator Forbes, you still got the floor.
Yeah, the only reason why I think it makes sense to do it in the order that the former speaker presented it is it seems to me logically that in order to realize the revenues, first the repeal has to occur. So the repeal occurs. Now there's going to be realized revenues. So we can discuss what those revenues are that flow from the repeal. Having identified the revenues, then we can discuss how to appropriate those revenues. It actually logically needs to be in the order that was presented by the mover, which is precisely why the mover wrote it up that way, because that's the logical progression. Repeal, identify revenues, appropriate. To say appropriate in the absence of the repeal makes no sense.
No. Then, Mr. Speaker, what I'm trying to say is that I would like to then to request the body to consider, or the chair, to consider the presentation of the motion of first repealing the GRT. If that fails, there is no revenue to appropriate. And if that fails, then I will withdraw the motion then to delete Section 32.
Oh, no problem. But I don't think you're going to have a problem with the repeal. So, I think we can discuss it in that order because it's a logical order.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay, on the question, on section 1, is there any objection to that? Okay, no objection, so ordered. On section...
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to just ask for a 1 minute recess. There is a member of the administration out there somewhere, and I'd just like him to jump on a phone real quick and just verify the revenue number.
Okay. Okay, we'll have a brief recess. We're discussing the revenue that will be realized, section 2. Okay, Speaker Forbes, you were discussing that earlier.
Right.
You still have the floor.
Thank you very much. I was able to speak to Mr. Camacho from Reverend Tax, and although the estimate that he was giving me had a broader range and kind of topped out at 3.8 million annualized, which would be 1.9 as opposed to 2, I think the difference is so small as to being negligible. So I really don't have a major heartburn accepting the mover's estimate of $2 million for revenue on this. In my conversation with the acting director, he'd indicated that some work had been done on this. He did say that he could be more accurate if he had a little bit of time to look at other numbers, but perhaps this is a good opportunity for us to recognize that at this late juncture we can't necessarily get perfect information about this. But I don't necessarily have a problem with accepting $2 million, and I do look at this as an interesting opportunity for us to to clean up what apparently has been a problem with the execution of this particular law. I'm very familiar, given the time I've been in the legislature, with, again, that old devil, the law of unintended consequences. And I know that when the author of the original law introduced it and got it passed, consequences developed for whatever reason that were unintended by the author, and I know this has been a problem for a number of years. And so this is an opportunity to fix that. It's always a good thing for us to do that, and to recognize yet again that from time to time the best laid plans of mice and men gang afterglay, and whether it's for external reasons or not, and sometimes, very often, it's for unforeseen external reasons. It's a good opportunity to clean it up. So, Mr. Speaker, I don't have any problem supporting a $2 million revenue estimate for the balance of the year. It's slightly over what Mr. Bamba would commit to me on the phone, and he did say that he was operating within a range, but it's not sufficiently different from the range that Mr. Camacho was expressing to lose any sleep over. So I have no problem accepting $2 million as a revenue estimate for this.
I thought it was said that it was $3 million. Anyway.
No. It's $2 million for the balance of the fiscal year. The number that he quoted to me was 3.8, maybe a little bit less for a full year. But if we take 3.8 and we cut it in half, it's 1.9. That's pretty close to 2. It's an inexact science. I'll accept it.
Okay, Senator Isisaki, on the amendment on Section 2 of the Pangalinan's amendment, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And you know what? I appreciate what Senator Ben's trying to do and Speaker Forbes is trying to say. But if we accept the number of $3.8 to $4 million for 1 year, gentlemen, we only have 4 months left if this were to be implemented, say, June. And based on that, my estimate is it should only be 1/3 of the average of 3.9, which means that we should expect a revenue of $1.3 million. Yeah, 1/3. 1/3 of the fiscal year is left. Well, June, July, August, September. Okay, so okay, whether it's 1/4 or 1/3, it will be less than $2 million. So I would like to suggest that we come out with a more prudent figure so that we don't create another imbalance. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, well, since there's a little concern, we will have a recess.